Hi, I'm Dan. I've been using Ruby since about 2007 when I built a website called Booko. That was my first experience with Ruby and Rails, and it's still running. It became my full-time job, and I've been doing it full-time for about 15 years. So it's a book price comparison site. So I'm interested in books and recommendations for books. So this talk, the basis of learning about all this stuff was interested in recommending books to people. So we'll be talking about semantic search and RAG, which is Retrieval Augmented Generation. We're lots of talking about embeddings, a little introduction or reminder of vectors and some of the maths around them, how to generate, store, search and compare embeddings, and then how to summarize content to provide a response. All right, so you'll all have used search in Ruby, I presume. Mostly it's keyword or lexical kind of search as provided by Postgres or Milne or Elasticsearch. With semantic search, though, rather than being based on a keyword, it's based on the meaning of a word or a phrase. And the way it does this is to use what's called an embedding. And embeddings are used by or generated by neural networks, and they're used in large language models, pretty core part of them. RAG itself combines semantic search and generative AI. So you use semantic search to find content that you that's relevant to your search, and then you use the generative side of AI to synthesize an answer based on that content or context. So what are embeddings? They're neural networks, right? And machines like to work with numbers, not so much words. So we need to convert words into numbers or vectors. And when you're doing this, ideally you want words that are similar to have a similar number or be close to each other. It's a bit complicated because plenty of words have multiple meanings. For example, great could mean large, or it could be exciting. So you need numbers that can embed that semantic value. Yeah, and so we use neural networks that are used to actually generate these numbers. And if there's questions or whatever, just go ahead and shout them out. So if we're thinking about words as vectors, here we are in 2 dimensions. What we really want is words with similar meaning to be close to each other in a vector space. So if we think about 2 dimensions, we want, for example, king and queen to be close to each other, man and woman. And as I was running through this with my son as a practice, he was like, but queen and woman also should be close. It's like, great point. In 2 dimensions, it's hard to express that. But when you have multiple dimensions, you can actually express that they're close in different ways like that. So the system that we'll be using or running through here has 1024 dimensions. Yeah. So what does it mean for a vector to be close? Well, you can, and I'm sorry, this is just a little bit of introductory maths. You may probably already know this. You can use Euclidean distance. This is something that you would have learnt in high school maths, I suspect, where you subtract the x components and the y components, square them in square root, and that's the distance between 2 points in the Euclidean space. And that will generalize to any number of dimensions. Don't have to just be x and y. However, when it comes to words and embeddings, this is not a very good measure because we don't want frequency of words to be so important. So another way to measure the distance between 2 vectors is the cosine similarity, which is basically the angle between the vectors. And even though this is only in 2 dimensions, that also generalizes to any number of dimensions. And cosine similarity is what's commonly used, or maybe always used, for embeddings. Right, so embeddings are a vector. And the way we generate them is, we don't do it in Ruby. We're going to go ahead and use an API. And you can use OpenAI, Anthropic, or I'm going to be using Olama, which is a little bit of software you can just brew install or install however you do on your operating system. And it's very nice. it lets you pull down models and run them locally. You can pull down models from Hugging Face, or they have their own models that are easy to pull. And basically that just gives you access to the LLMs via a HTTP interface. Now, I think maybe every model has to generate embeddings, and most models you can actually get the embeddings from. But for this kind of system where we're going to be using them for search, we will use a model that is designed or built just to provide embeddings. And the one I've chosen is MXBAI embed large. That's probably a way to pronounce that. All right. So here's a little bit of code where we're going to generate an embedding. We make a client, an Olama client. So yeah, beg your pardon. There's a Ruby Olama gem, and you can install that and talk to Olama. However, it's actually a very simple interface. You don't really need a gem. Right, so this code here will be taking a search string, a text, and then it's going to generate a embedding from it. And one thing to note when you're building this kind of a system is that embedding models often will have a prefix that you should apply to the text before you generate an embedding, depending on the use of the embedding. So when you're indexing, you can see here that I was experimenting with Nomic embed text and MXBI embed large. And you can see that for search in that bottom method there, they're the prefixes that they suggest for your text before you pass them to the model. And it's the same for search. There can be a prefix. So this is quite weird to me. In fact, I built this whole thing without knowing that, and it worked fine. But I suspect it'll work better now. Follow the instructions. So another key thing to understand when you're building these things is that each model will have its own context length. And so this one that I'm using is the MXBI large. That has a context length of, it's a couple of hundred words, can't quite remember. The other one that's listed there, it's in the thousands. But there's pros and cons to having long context when you're generating embeddings. So you can imagine that one sentence will have a very sort of specific semantic meaning, but an entire paragraph of text will have several meanings in it. So depending on what you're going to be generating embeddings for, you'd want to experiment and learn and practice and figure out which is the best way to do it. And if your text is larger than the context, then you probably need to do chunking, where you take your input and you break it up into chunks big enough for the embedding network to deal with. Here's an example of a reply. If we imagine that it's a 5-dimensional embedding that comes back, this is just the sort of thing you get. It's like a floating point array. There's 7 vectors of 5 dimensions there. So once we've generated our embeddings, we need to store them somehow. And depending on your application and the size, you can just keep them in memory. You can write them to disk. You can store them in a database. But it is useful to use a vector database because, I mean, if there's any value and you need to load it up again, obviously it's rather than generating embeddings again, it's nice to have them available. And the vector databases will do a very clever thing. You can give it a vector and ask it for the closest vectors that it has stored that vector. So this whole thing got kicked off because I saw a post about this product called SQLite Vec. And it's just a guy who's built an extension to SQLite. You just Ruby gem install it, and it just works. It's great. You could also use PG vector extension. Milne Search has their own. I haven't tried Pinecone with yet or Milvis, but right. So we've generated embeddings now to store them. So here's an example of using SQLite Vec. This is just copied from their domain, from their installation instructions. So you can see here we're opening a database, enabling extensions, loading the extension, the SQLite Vec extension, and then disabling extensions. And then we're going to create a virtual table that holds these embeddings. Now, a key point to remember is that this embedding network that I'm using is 1024 dimensions. So you need to make sure that your vector storage is large enough to hold that. And there's an example of inserting. So my use case for this has been, like I said, I've been interested in books and recommending books, and there's a subreddit called Suggest Me a Book. And so what I've been doing is collecting the posts for Suggest Me a Book, and that's where someone will ask a question. They'll say, I'm dealing with loss or grief. Can you recommend me some books? And then the comments will be book recommendations. So I've got a large corpus of these, and so this is what I've been experimenting with. So here we can see we step through the posts, generate, we check we haven't got it already stored in our embedding database. We add the title and the content of the post together. Then we pass it back to the method you saw earlier, which will prefix it with the right text. And then add post ID to vector. Post ID vector, that's where it gets dropped into the database. All right, so we've generated embeddings, we've stored some embeddings, and now we're going to search the embeddings. So it happens the same way. You take your text string and you pass it into your LLM model, you prefix it if required, and it'll spit back a vector, an embedding. So this is the order of this is a bit complicated, but basically what you do from that embedding, you ask for the nearest vectors, and then part of the response includes the row ID, which is in this case the ID for the post. So you can ask a question, it'll find the nearest vectors and their associated posts, and it will find the posts and return you the posts that most closely match your request semantically. All right, so hopefully I can do a little example here. All right, yeah, so this is a llama. So it's the models that you can, and when you're doing this, you want the embedding models. Okay, so this is an example of the kind of post. Suggest me a book without telling me about it. So this is the title, this is the content, this kind of thing. Yeah, I already did this search. Great. Okay, so here's an example, right? I just did this live, I swear. It was just sitting there, but so here's a search for, I want fantasy books for children. And you can see in the first post, this is a post title and the content. This is someone else requesting the same thing, right? But you can notice in here, it doesn't say children. It says kids. So you can see a semantic search has happened here, not just a keyword search. And what's even cooler is this one doesn't even mention kids or children. It just says 5-year-old, which I think is, that's just like magic to me. I can't even comprehend how that works, but it's so cool. Yeah, but the tree, yeah, you raise a good point. Well, this is the complicated part, right? So
they are fantasy books.
They are fantasy books, yeah. I mean, you could probably look at the number of requests for children's books and figure out that mostly they're fantasy books. But yeah, okay, cool.
Quick question.
Yeah.
How big is your data set? Is it just those 5?
No, there's not. So
But no, seriously, so how big is your data set?
32,000 posts. 32,000 posts.
And how long did you run it locally? How long did it take the process?
To generate the embeddings, maybe it took 10 minutes.
Locally, 32,000.
Yeah. Maybe it took a bit more than 10 minutes. The thing is, yeah, it's around that number. It's not like days or hours or something. It was in the minutes, definitely less than an hour. Yeah, right.
Do you embed the whole comment text?
No, I haven't. That's a good idea though. You could definitely do that. This is just the post title and the content. not the comments of the posts. Please, come on. All right, here we go. Nerdabot diaries. That's what I was looking for. So yeah, okay. Searches and it, you know, it's pretty cool, I reckon. All right, so the next step, okay, we've generated our embeddings, we've searched our embeddings, we've found posts that are kind of relevant, hopefully, to what we're looking for. So that really is semantic search. You can take that and use it in all sorts of interesting ways, search documents. But the part of this that would make it RAG is when you then generate a response or synthesize a response from your corpus. And in this case, I'll be collecting all of the comments and then I'll pass them in and ask it to generate a response and summarize the comments to those posts. All right, did we say all this? Yeah, right. So, you take a query, we're going to collect all our posts, get all the comments, map them, flatten it. So we've got just a big array of the comments. Now here comes prompt engineering. So here's my prompt, but your prompt will, depending on what you're actually building, the prompt you use will take a lot of tweaking and experimenting to find a good prompt to help you get a good response. And you'll also notice that I'm not using that embedding network anymore. This is a different network called Llama 3.1. This will run on a laptop, no problem. And it's also running through a Llama. So, yeah, okay. So what we'll do here is we'll concatenate all of our comments together, prefix it with that prompt, and then send it to the LLM and ask it for an answer, for it to generate a response. Yeah, demonstration. Oh yeah, okay, why not? So here's a request for a book. I love spiders in science and space. Any books about spiders in space? I should have picked one that I didn't already have the answers for. But this is actually running live. So it will be taking that query, embedding it, searching for close vectors, finding the associated posts, plucking out all the comments, prefixing it with the prompt, and sending it to the LLM for an answer. And that's the response just there. That's just spat straight out of the LLM. And this is the book I was looking for. If you're interested in books about spiders running a planet, that's your book. Yeah, okay. So one last thing, which I haven't actually done a lot of preparation for here, but I did do a lot of work on, is clustering. So you can imagine that these posts in 1024 dimensional space will often cluster around various subjects. For example, I know that one of the common requests is, I haven't done any reading for a long time. Can you suggest me an easy book to get into? So those kind of posts, because they're similar, they will form a cluster in this 1024 dimensional space. So you can use clustering technology such as k-means clustering. The tricky part about it is that you need to you start guessing a number of clusters, and then it will attempt to find that many clusters. There are techniques to figure out when you've got the right number of clusters, because there's no real answer, right? Like one book might belong to two clusters. Like it's like, give me a children's book about grief. Okay, so that's a children's book and it's also a book about grief. So it's not a perfect science. Yeah, and that was interesting. It was fun. I tried doing several things, reducing the number of dimensions, and then running the k-means clustering. And, you know, it kind of mostly sort of worked a little bit if you squinted your eyes. It was all right. But I think if you, yeah, it all depends on on the corpus that you're looking to do the search and generation and clustering on. Yeah. So any questions? I must have explained that so well. Yeah.
No, it's been great. I've heard RAG over and over again, but no one's told me you do this generation of embeddings, then you do the search on the embeddings, and
Yep.
then you get the LLM.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what is the missing piece that embedding?
Yeah.
It's good. But why do I need to write this in Ruby? Like, isn't there tools already that will, I can just give it a whole bunch of data and they will generate a RAG for me? At which point I should be able to just do the search, or like,
Yeah, maybe.
you had a couple of things where you're like, oh, I need to cut this down and chunk it up and whatever else. Like, do I really need to do that, or does OLAMA come with its own kind of tool?
No, they don't. I mean, look, it's all application dependent, right? Like, so this one, because it's posts and comments, so, like you're doing the search on the post, but you're generating the response on the comments. So, like one common thing is, here's a bunch of documents, corporate documents. Can you index them and just tell me the answer? Like, I just want to search these PDFs, Word documents, whatever. And in that case, right, the post is the only thing. There is no comment, right? So you'd be chunking those, generating the embeddings, finding the section of text, and you can either just use it as a index to find the document that you're looking for, or you can use RAG and generate a response based on your corporate documents that might match. And yeah, I'm sure there's commercial versions of this kind of stuff. Generally, I think you'd probably want to run that kind of stuff on site. Like, I'm not sure you want to share. You definitely want to make sure the privacy point of view is covered so that your data is safe, not shared to another company.
Just to add to that, and there are a lot of services that you stuff like database and all that. In my opinion, it's actually very easy to do with just moving Rails. So literally, the other thing that today is
like that's not a lot of code.
Exactly, it's like
You know, I went to write.
I do, I use Claude 3.5 and I talk to it all day. I work by myself. I don't work with other people. And I use it like a rubber duck now. And yeah, and it's not bad, right? But often it'll give you old code, or sometimes it just like goes off the rails and gives you some weird stuff. I mean, it's really helpful. Review this code for me. Sorry?
Just like a president.
Yeah, I guess so. Who doesn't get sick of you asking the same question over and over and over and over? Yeah, try again.
I was wondering if this is really cool, but it's still a bit abstract in my head. Would it be possible to run through a request with a debugger and see what's happening like step by step, or is that like
to get the embeddings?
Yeah, like now.
Yeah.
Is it possible to do it now?
Well, the problem is the embedding stuff, that's all happening in OLAMA.
Yeah.
And it'll be running in a Python, yeah.
But
So
at least the Ruby bits that like you get this thing and then this spits out this other thing.
Well,
to understand what's happening.
the interesting part to me is how you generate the embedding. Is that what you're going for? Because all the rest of this Ruby stuff, you can totally do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything opaque in the Ruby.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I was just wondering because I'm still trying to sort of like, visualize
24
like, what's happening. Yeah.
dimensional space.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's heaps of good YouTube videos
Okay,
on it.
So, like, 3 blue, 1 brown.
Oh,
Yeah, he's amazing. That guy.
Yeah.
Look at one of his videos on LLMs. There are a few videos and it's very easily explained.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant videos. Yeah.
Any quirks with results?
Um,
Like recommended the wrong thing or
Totally garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I have. I can't think of any particular examples, but usually it's because a post will exist in multiple, like it's got vectors that would associate it with several different questions, I suppose. Like I said before, like a kid's book on grief or yeah. But usually mostly it's been good. When I was doing the clustering, I was asking my wife scrolling through, do these all sound right? She's like, no. The clustering stuff is fun though. Like that was really fun. Yeah.
so do you test this or
No, it's not deterministic.
just one of those things that
But wait a second. Of course, no, but let's break it into two parts, right? So the embedding stuff, that's way more testable because that shouldn't have any randomness or no temperature. Like when you're doing the generative stuff though, you know, there's the temperature attribute and that will determine how random the results are. So if you want to do that sort of testing, you'd have to turn the temperature down to 0. So you always get the same kind of response. And also it depends on prompt engineering and which model you're using. Yeah, it's quite. Yes. Yes. I mean, I don't know. Is there?
Project once and I tried this actually against OpenAI's API. I set the temperature to 0, but it's still giving me slightly different results. So I'd be looking for like, I can't remember exactly, like I would ask a software development question or something, and I expect to get like a particular, some words in the response, but sometimes they would be there in a different order. Like it might say programming, it might say software development, it might say like crafting software, like you don't exactly, even with temperature 0, I could just, I don't know, maybe it's just me, I couldn't get a reliable response. Yeah, like I'd get flaky tests because, oh, this word wasn't there, but the response actually. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like, yeah, I do it all the time. I post back the question and say, can you review this code for me?
You can test everything except just the prompting part, the last one.
Yeah.
But that you don't need to test that because it's like external API out.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna test some external API because that's you just started with like PCR or something like that. So that's what, but you can test the search, the embedding because it's default.
Yeah.
So
What's your next steps?
Next steps. This is just fun. I don't really have any. I just built this for fun. No, not a problem. No, I was just
like a good product. I'd use it.
Would you add it to Booker? I mean, what's stopping you adding?
nothing really. I mean, I could, yeah. So instead of just doing a search for title and author, obviously you'd have another search field that said, tell me the kind of book you're interested in. One of the hardest parts, to be honest, is when you get the results back, you can ask it for Markdown, right? I don't know if you noticed that I said, please reply in Markdown. You can also say, please reply in JSON, and you can try and force it to do that. But maybe I didn't try hard enough, but like I would say, give me the title of either the book or the series and the author, if there's an author, or just the author. Like it can't give you an ISBN. Like, I mean, it can, and sometimes they're real ISBNs and sometimes they're not. Like it'll just make them up. It will make them up. So you can try to extract title and author and series, but the way people post is totally inconsistent. They get the spelling wrong. They misremember the name. So it's very hard to actually pluck titles out, right? So if you can imagine plucking some titles out, like Children of Time, then you'd go and perform this Booko search. And then, yeah, so maybe it would kind of work, but if I tried harder, yeah.
Sorry, just one last thing. On the JSON stuff,
Mm.
did you have success with Olama? So I've tried to do JSON responses and it's been perfect with ChatGPT or whatever the AI thing is.
Yeah.
Whenever I did it with Olama, and I think with ChatGPT, I would even tell it, here's this JSON schema, I want the response.
Yeah, that's right.
But in Olama, locally, it did weird stuff. It put like new line characters in there and didn't finish off the curly braces and things like that. That was just like,
Yeah, so yeah, I mean they're trying. Obviously, it'll only improve, right? Like you said, you provide it with a schema and you do your best, and I'm sure different models provide different levels of adherence to the request.
but does allow support structure?
Yeah, this is a llama.
Yeah. So
how new is that?
5th of December, 2024.
I think the last time I tried was probably about October last year.
Yeah, right. I still didn't find it that great.
I mean, things change.
They are changing really fast. Yeah. And I'm sure it depends on which model. So I've only been really using the local ones, like anything I can run on my laptop, but they're pretty great. Yeah.
Just on another question.
Yeah.
AI. Has anyone got the AI going in Google Chrome?
You mean running in Wasm?
Yeah, the Gemini. So you can you can do AI in your console. Maybe I'll do that for you.
I'm looking forward to Claude 3.7 being available in Kaji.
Actually, what is Katia is?
Yeah, it's a paid search engine. Yeah, it's $5 a month or $25 a month gives you access to all of the chat systems. So here, look.
I got some free trial.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, cool. Yeah, these are the models you can talk to. I didn't realize they had a recommended limit of tokens used per month. I blew over it by a long way. Yeah, this has been great though.
From your query results, do you sort them by any chance, or can you
So
the distance of the meanings?
yeah, can you limit the, yes, you would be able to, because what you would do is you would just recalculate the distance when you got the vectors back. Yeah. And by the way, if you're doing that stuff like the clustering, the Facebook, I don't know what it's called, FAISS, it's a library and it's available inside Ruby. And I was doing this clustering and I'm like, it's running for 5 minutes to generate a cluster. Inside Face, it was like that. It was just so much faster. So I recommend it if you ever want to do stuff in memory or some other kind of like especially the clustering stuff. But just be mindful that when you are using a library like that, that you may be thinking in terms of cosine similarity, but it may be thinking in terms of Euclidean distance. So you have to make sure that those things map across properly. Like you can use Euclidean distance, but you must first normalize the vectors, right? Like, because Face wants to use Euclidean distance, just in case that wasn't obvious. And I was finding everything else in cosine similarity, and then I put it all in here, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And it's like, oh, it's using a different way of measuring distance. Yeah, I suppose so. It's it's a number between 0 and 1, I think, or 0 and 2.
For everything part, but you get on.
Yeah.
But then put it on Instagram.
Oh, to see out of all the posts. Yeah, I'm sure. Sure, you could. I tried to plot the clusters. I was trying to, and I was using Kaji here to like show me a library to plot things in 2 dimensions after I reduced it from 1024 down to 2. It didn't work. It was a bit of a mess, but I suspected it should, because some posts, like I said, kids' books over here, lost over here, recommend me an easy book here.
On that, there is actually open source tooling to visualize this multi-dimensional data. And when it tries, the original does compress it to 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
But then it tries to compress it without losing this kind of detail.
That's called principal component analysis, PCA, and it is super fun and clever. Yeah, just a quick example of how it might work. If you've got a table of, say, car attributes and you're looking to reduce the number of attributes, then an attribute like weight and fuel economy, if you use PCA, it might merge those two into an unnameable now attribute, and it's 20% that and 79% that, and it's lost that 1%. And so that's how you do it. They compress it down like that. And so the more that you compress, the more that you lose data. But it's really fun, that stuff.
Still keep some insights.
Yeah.
What's the C stand for?
Principal component analysis. And Face, that's another one that Face was quite good at. In fact, I think I only did it in Face because I didn't want to implement it myself in Ruby.
Ban on using one component for anything else.
I love it. The semantic meaning of that component is very different.
Thank you so much.
No worries.